I wonder if I'm getting more optimistic as I get older.
If this is you optimistic, I don't want to meet you when you're younger.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Spirits and Ghost Stories. I'm your host, Thomas Aarons.
And I'm Carly Bird.
Week 71. We started that off with our dog snoring so freaking loud. You can hear it.
Cute. So cute. We can hear it upstairs.
Yeah, I don't think the mics are picking it up, but when he drops a bone or like he'll thud his head really like almost concussion level hard against the wall or something when he rolls and you can hear it.
Just flops around.
Or you can hear him when he goes like a big like and when he snores, it's not like a snore, it's like an exhale?
It's more like a snort.
Yeah.
It would be a snort versus a snore because he goes and then like he breathes in and then he breathes out.
Almost like it's like he's just like stress relief.
Yeah.
And now we're going to start scary things in the news.
Scary things in the news.
Here we go. And so Carly had it today. Carly, what do we got on the screen here?
All right. Today I found terrifying but true horror stories reported in the news.
I know that.
Obviously. All right, fellas. The Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa is a well-known tourist attraction for ghost hunters and horror lovers alike. The site of a gruesome, unsolved 1912 murder in which 6 children and 2 adults had their skulls completely crushed by the axe of an unknown perpetrator was purchased in 1994, the year I was born, restored to its 1912 condition, and converted into a tourist destination. It costs $428 a night to stay at the old haunted home, where visitors always report strange paranormal experiences, such as visions of a man with an axe roaming the halls or the faint screams of children. But in November of 2014, the haunting took a darker turn. Robert Stephen Larson Jr., 37 years old, of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, was on a regular recreational paranormal visit with friends when the true horror struck. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office said Larson suffered the self-inflicted injury at about 12:45 a.m., which is around the same time the 1219 axe murders in the house began. Larson recovered from his injuries, but has never spoken publicly about what occurred that day. For Martha Lynn, the owner of the home, the incident was very upsetting. It's publicity, but it's not exactly the kind of publicity you desire to have. I don't want people thinking that when they come to the Villisca Axe Murder House, something's going to happen that's going to make them do something like that. The house remains open for tourists' visits and overnight stays today. Basically, what happened was, whenever Larson stayed at the house, his companions found him stabbed in the chest, an apparently self-inflicted wound. They called 911, and Larson was brought to a nearby hospital before being helicoptered to the Creighton University Medical Center.
That is horrible.
So he stabbed himself in the chest while he stayed in that house by an axe.
That'd be a way to go.
But he didn't die.
But no,
he survived.
Just to stab yourself in the chest like that?
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know.
You picked up smoking?
But, yeah, all the time. While I'm in the basement of our house. You see the plumes of smoke going through the ceiling. But no, like just the idea, like to be able to like, so example is I heard rumors that like biting your fingers is almost impossible. But your brain will not let you actually bite your own fingers off. And I was like wondering like if that's the same thing with like stabbing yourself in the chest with a knife. I don't think
right. How could you possibly do it? Exactly. And that's where the paranormal comes into play, where like, was it actually him? Was it a ghost?
Or schizophrenia.
He won't even talk about it.
I really do wonder in the olden days how much of this stuff has to do with drugs and hallucination.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, could you imagine if you were a cult leader back in like the 60s and you just dosed everybody's Kool-Aid with LSD and then got into like a weird, like, you know, we're worshiping the goat man of Maryland. And then all of a sudden people are seeing stuff and they're like, oh, it's real. because back then we didn't have the ability to like do like, I don't know, brain function and like, oh, I wonder if this is real or not. Nope, it's got to be some spirit.
Right.
Gotta
If
be
I
some
saw
ghost.
it happened.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to like debunk all ghost myths, but it's just so weird. Like if you did get a hallucinating drug, or the one time that I really thought I saw stuff on my ceiling was after my first reconstructive shoulder surgery, and they actually gave me the old opioid, like Vicodin, like the stuff that's basically banned right now. And they gave that to me. And then again, because of the surgery and how my arm was, I wasn't allowed to lay down for the first week or two. I had to lay in a sofa, like upright and sleep. And I was on so much drugs, and I didn't eat a lot. And I saw all these bugs, like the size of my hand, crawling on the ceiling.
Ew!
Back and forth. And in this one corner, it was like this big thing I couldn't see. I think it was like a shadow person. But the thing is, like, it was so vivid in my mind. Now, had I not been on drugs, I could see where people would be like, oh, that was a ghost.
Right.
But now looking back,
You're like,
what it
oh,
was,
this is some hard shit.
I was on the hard shit. But imagine if you just didn't know that part of it. Like, oh my gosh, like that right there. That's a shadow person.
Yeah.
Ooh. But with that said, and that interesting case, that kind of gets us into today's tale as well. With the sheriff that had to go there to detect that story and what happened. This story today, the stories that we have today, talk about what it's like to be a first responder on the scene and some of the things. Because remember, when they call 911, you got to go. Doesn't matter where it's at, which we'll talk about that at the end, because I think that's a whole can of worms there.
Okay.
Time now for the tale of Beneath the Surface. Reconstructing the scene would take time, but from the marks on the concrete divider and the skid marks on the road, it was pretty clear to me what had happened. The driver had lost control and hit the guardrail, and the car had somersaulted over the barrier into the freezing water below. The driver, a 32-year-old female, had been in the car with her 12-month-old infant son at the time when the car plummeted to its current location. Passing motorists had seen the car in the water and had alerted us to the accident. When we arrived at the scene, it was already a mess. There were a number of spectators parked all over the area and were looking down at the car below. A few brave men seemed to be trying to scale down the steep ravine to the car to see if they could lend some assistance. From what my partner, Officer Thompson, and I could tell, it was more likely we would have more people to rescue if they continued. Good Samaritans at times cause more chaos than they actually do help, especially in dangerous situations like this one. From the looks of the car, it had been down there for a while, and we were concerned that it was likely to be a recovery of bodies of whoever was inside, rather than taking them to the hospital to treat their injuries. We had already run the plates for the vehicles and knew the person that the car belonged to. We had no idea that there was an infant on board. We were calling in backup to help us with the recovery efforts when from down below, we started to hear a woman's voice.
Please, someone, my son is in here. Help us, please.
To be able to hear a voice coming from the wreck sent shockwaves through me. Immediately, I started drawing up ideas in my head about how I would get down there fast enough to save them both. Thompson looked equally shocked that the driver would be able to survive the crash. I knew based on what I could tell of the conditions of the car from here, the injuries were going to be severe. Every second was going to count. The woman's voice continued to call out to us, imploring her desire for us to save her son's life. As a father myself, the idea that a child's life was in danger fueled my desire to get down there as quickly as I could. If there was something I could do to get that little boy out of there, I would do it. It wouldn't do any good if we broke a leg getting down there, however. So we tied a length of rope we had to a tree near the edge and used it to make our way down the steep slope to the river's edge. The car had come to rest on its roof across the river, so we would be approaching from the direction of the trunk. It was sticky. It was sticking a little higher in the air than the hood, so it gave me hope that the boy hadn't drowned if the mother was still alive in the front of the vehicle. The moment I took a step into the water, a chill went through my entire body. The temperature had to be just above freezing, cold enough to kill if someone was exposed long enough. I knew there was no choice but to push deeper into the river. After only a few steps, the current started to make its presence known. The slippery surface of the submerged rocks made every step a challenge. If I wasn't careful, I could easily slip, twist an ankle, or worse. Wanting to let the woman know we were almost there, I called out to her, Ma'am, we're almost there. Just hold on. We're going to be there soon." I didn't get a response from her. As frantic as she had sounded before, I just hoped that we hadn't gotten here too late. Wading forward, I approached the car from the driver's side. I wanted to let her know we were there and get a look at the injuries that she sustained and possibly her son. She could be dealing... Officer Thompson moved to the other side to check on the condition of the infant boy. I rounded the end of the car and hesitated for a moment. Even without being able to see inside the car, I knew something was wrong. The front of the car had obviously taken the worst of the impact and had landed top down when it hit the river. The door of the car showed extensive damage. Not only that, but from what I could tell, the front part of the vehicle where the driver would be sitting was almost entirely submerged. The fact that the mother had somehow survived this crash seemed nothing short of a miracle. I pushed my way through the water, which was almost halfway up my thighs, and I looked through the tiny slit of the window that was still above water. Inside, I could see a torso of someone still in the driver's seat. With the damage to the car, there was no way the person driving had survived. Even if they had, they would have drowned long since. I suppose it was possible for someone else to be driving and the mother to have been in the back seat with the child. "Thompson, you got anyone else back there besides the kid?" I asked. "No, just the child. He's still strapped in the car seat. We're going to have to cut him out. The door won't open." "Can you see if there is anyone in the passenger's seat from where you're at?" He disappeared from view for a moment. When he reappeared, he just shook his head. No. Something wasn't adding up here. We both heard the mother calling out for us to save her son, but there wasn't anyone alive down here. There was no way the only other person in the car could have been the one calling for us to save the child. But I clearly heard the woman's voice coming from the vehicle. A chill went through my body that I had nothing to do with the temperature of the water. I was just caught in a daze when Thompson's voice brought me back to the situation at hand. Hey! What is the status of the mother? She's still alive over there?" I didn't know what to tell him. At this point, I didn't know what to tell myself. So I just shook my head. I saw his shoulders slump a bit, thinking we must have been a little too late arriving to get to her in time. I hear a movement behind me, and I see a couple of firefighters coming down the embankment with the jaws of life to cut the child from the car. Thompson waves them over to the passenger side and directs them to focus their attention on the child in the back seat. To our relief, when we gained access to the interior of the car, we find that the child has survived the accident, although cold from being exposed to the cold temperatures. He is in relatively good condition given the severe circumstances of the wreck. An ambulance is on the scene and we place the child in their care. While we deal with the situation, with who we believe is the mother. Thompson comes around to the driver's side for the first time and sees what I know all too well for the past 10 minutes. There's no way. Thompson looked at me, his face, all the color's gone. There's no way she could have survived this. How then could she have? We both heard her, right? His voice trails off, but the look on his pale face said volumes. I wish I could have given him an explanation that made sense. I had already tried and failed to come up with something that made the pieces fit together. All I could do was stay silent. It had been nearly 6 years since we arrived at the scene of that crash. There were a number of things that went our way that allowed us to save that boy's life. Some of it was luck. Some of it, I think, was something else. I truly believe that the boy's mother called out to us, even in death, to save the life of her child. I'm convinced he is alive today because of her. And that was the tale of Beneath the Surface.
Yeah, I believe that's possible.
Oof, that's just like goosebumps. I got goosebumps halfway through that. I had to like sometimes guys was like, maintain, not there.
Yeah.
Because I can almost picture like the lights of like the cop cars like hitting the water at night.
Right.
And you're struggling down there and you're thinking like what you're going to
must have been
find.
a really shallow river because the car obviously didn't sink to like a 20-foot depth.
Potomac River, the Shenandoah, like the river right here where we live, like it's shallow, but I mean, if you flip and the current hits, let's say,
right, you're pretty much crushed.
How this car, I think, is if you're driving like this, and so I'm on this side and I'm driving and you're this side, and you hit and you flip.
That's the impact.
The problem is now the current of the river is hitting the door. You couldn't even get out if you wanted to because the pressure is going to keep it in there.
Right.
But then, and then the river would never freeze over here. It would be a rarity if it froze. Yeah. So you're dealing with cold current. Mm-hmm. And I've had, that one guy, we had talked about the one time, like there was a dead body in a car and you just didn't know. Right. And it's just so easy. Like, I don't know, like all that's just, oof. And then that kind of got me into my other thought, like I want to say before that story, which is if you're a first responder, some of the places you have to go. I mean, we're going to try to do a lot more stories like this with this first responder because there's a lot of good ones out there, and what they have to go through, you wonder how much of that is actually true or not. Yeah,
they have a lot of opportunities to, I would say, run into some pretty creepy experiences.
Yes. Now, I do have one more story. It's a little bit shorter. Okay. To finish it off, did you want to read it or did you want me to?
I'll read it. Prepare yourselves for the tale, The Guardrail. It was Christmas Eve 2010. I was in a mad dash to get home from work as I was running late for our Christmas Eve party. It was pouring rain and driving conditions were quite murky. Just around the corner from our subdivision is a guardrail. It was a tight corner that had harbored many accidents over the years. As I passed the guardrail, I did a double take. Through the sheets of the rain, I could make out the figure of a man who stood on top of it as if contemplating jumping. I did not flip around immediately. In fact, I drove my car into the driveway and sat there for a second, half having an inner fight with myself. Part of me was arguing it wasn't my business not to get involved, but the other part of me said, it's Christmas Eve. This guy might really need some help. Where's your holiday spirit? I sighed loudly and pounded my fists on my steering wheel before turning my key over and backing out of my driveway. The rain was pounding down with no sign of letting up, and since there were no other cars in the road at the time, I flicked my high beams on to get a better look once I neared the guardrail. There was no sign of the man. My mind began to race. Had he actually jumped? I put my car into park and pulled off the road. I fumbled for my cell phone and ran out into the freezing rain to search for him. I searched the entire side of the road to no avail. I even called out, "Hey! And do you need any help? If someone is out there, give some sort of sign." As if some mere cosmic fate, I happened to peer down at the ground just then and saw what looked like a piece of shattered taillight. I flipped my flashlight on my phone and protected it with my sleeve, and then searched closer to the guardrail. To my surprise, the guardrail was mangled in that one spot. How I had not seen it earlier, I have no idea. It could have been the intense rain or the pressure I'd felt to get home quickly, but something had happened here. I walked further forward through the mangled guardrail as far as I dared to the edge of the cliff. Sure enough, there was a small car down there at the bottom, overturned in need of help. My pulse raced a mile a minute. I quickly dialed 911 and called for help. I was shaking. I told the dispatcher that at one point I had seen the man peering over the edge down the side. Had that man caused the accident? Was he in it? Did he make it out? And if so, where is he? While talking to the dispatcher, I searched every place I could get to for any sign of the man. He was not there. When help arrived, I was ushered back and thanked for calling it in. An officer led me to my car and saw me off. I watched as he faded out of view back into the rainy darkness that now was only illuminated by red and blue lights. Before I left, I called my wife and I told her why I was running late and if she'd mind if I stayed a few minutes longer. She was fine with it, so I did. I sat there in my car, soaked to the bone, leaning over my steering wheel with my eyes closed, praying for whoever was in that car to be all right. I stayed long enough to watch the officers with flashlights searching the entire embankment and side of the road. They found nothing that I could tell. Heavy-hearted, I turned my key and headed home in hopes the morning paper or the news would fill me in on the grim details. There was a man and his pregnant wife in that car accident. The husband died on impact. The wife was rescued and in critical condition, but expected to recover. I still have to wonder to this day, did I see some passerby on the guardrail who witnessed the accident but ran off? Or was it the spirit of the husband trying to gain some help for his wife who was pinned in the car? If you ask me, I think it was the latter. And that was the tale.
That's so freaking creepy. I don't know why that just hits me so hard. I don't know. It's like, yeah, that makes sense.
It's spirits that refuse to, or souls that refuse to move on until something is taken care of.
You wonder if like hospitals, like working at a hospital.
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh, yeah. I've heard so many hospital ghost stories.
From Mary?
No, just like everywhere. I don't know what kind of question that is.
The trees are like, oh yeah.
So Mary, yes, a little bit, but like not
From
as
your job?
many from her. Not necessarily, just from like, I don't know, social media and the things that I follow online. Just I feel like a lot of them happen to be from the hospital because that's where people die. So that's where their souls are typically released.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just that, but like trauma too. I think there's something specifically about trauma.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, if you die in your piece at 100 years old, that's different than if you were in a
Right.
car wreck with your wife or your kid.
Yeah.
Or if you're in the military or something
Right.
like that. Like, I don't know. Like, I think it has to do with energy. And again, like going back to that Joe Rogan episode where he had the two kids on talking about that, I think it's something about energy and like
Yeah.
when energy moves from one plane to the other. Because yeah, if you say like, oh yeah, a 200-year-old woman died in her sleep in a hospital, it's like one thing. But that story about like, yeah, an infant and her mother was like killed violently, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I don't know. It's just like so. And I can believe it. My mind can go there that like, yeah, somehow you would call out to save your son, or you try to like help your wife that's trapped. Like a part of you would stay.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. But then it's the fact that you're the first one on the scene.
Yeah.
That's what's like, I just got goosebumps again. Because it's just like, if you did watch somebody like almost die.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
I've been there like driving and I watched somebody like, I think that person died. Like, I think it was like when I was going down to take my boat and on 81, I saw where like it just happened. This car went over the embankment and then hit a tractor trailer on. And like, so this side of 81, which is the highway, was shut down. And like this car was like underneath this tractor trailer. And there were no cops there yet. People were just getting out and stuff, and they were like looking in to see if someone was there. And I'm going down the 81, so it's just like, this is quick. But then you think about like, if you're the person in the tractor trailer that gets out and you have to be the first one to look in there.
Right.
Oh God, I don't know. Could you imagine that's your job as an EMT or something? I don't know if I could do that. To be the first person in some of these bad situations to look over the edge or like look there first.
Yeah.
And then if you believe in the supernatural, you would be the one to see that.
Right.
And that's what's so interesting in some of these. And again, we're going to do way more of these stories. I think it's so fascinating. If you're the first one there when somebody dies like that, of course you'd be the one to see the spirit. And guess what? There always is they are the ones that see this stuff. And that's just creepy as shit to me. Because it's like, I don't know. I don't know what that means. Closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. Ghosts are real. And a lot of the time they have a purpose. And once you fulfill that purpose, they'll move on.
Would you rather be the first one on the scene or use a Ouija board?
First one on the scene.
Why?
Because Ouija boards are inviting the devil. I'm fine with ghosts. I'm not fine with the demons.
I don't know if I could be the first one to like look into that car. I don't know why. There's something like worse about that. Like, oh, you're gonna see a dead body, and like a dead body. I've worked on. I've seen cadavers before. You know, I think we've talked about that like in my old life.
You know what's funny?
That's so weird when I say like in my old life, but anyway.
What's funny is that you said you've seen cadavers before, and what the first thing that popped in my head was the fact that cadavers are like naked, right? And then I was like, oh, well, I used to major in art, and so we used to have naked models come in and I would paint them. So,
but it's different when it's dead.
I know it's different when it's dead, but I'm just letting you know where my mind trailed off to.
But anyway,
but
like my point is like it's just different, like in the sense like that's not a human anymore.
I know.
And that's what's so weird when something is not.
It's a meat suit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that's so weird. Then why we're afraid to see a dead body? Because it's like what do you think it's gonna go? Booga booga booga. It's not. It's like dead, but we're all afraid of that. And to me, it's like, yeah, I would not. I would rather play with a Ouija board in a haunted house than be like the first person.
You're
like,
afraid of that.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I'm saying. Like, I would rather do that than be like, Tom, go look to see if that person's still alive. I don't think I could do it. I don't know. I don't think I could do that. I don't know why. I don't know why. I can tell myself I have dealt with that before. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna look at this muscle. But the idea, like, I don't know what I would see, and it's like, what if you do see the spirit there? Because that's when I feel like you could see a spirit. I think the Ouija board's full of horseshit. But somebody dies tragically. I don't know.
Yeah.
But on that bombshell, guys, thank you so much. This has been episode 72, and we'll see you next time on Spirits and Ghost Stories.
Bye.
Bye.